This video is going to be about the promotional piece done with Entertainment Weekly for the upcoming House of the Dragon TV series. But instead, after really looking at the quotes from Ryan Condal about his and Miguel Sapochnik's casting choices, this conversation seems like it may not go away. And I think it's worthwhile to do my best to have an honest conversation about it. Here's a quote from Ryan Condal. "It was very important for Miguel and I to create a show that was not another bunch of white people on the screen. We wanted to find a way to put diversity in the show, but we didn't want to do it in a way that felt like it was an afterthought, or worse, tokenism." Now that statement obviously caused a bit of a stir for some. Most who are critical of the showrunner put an emphasis on the line, "another bunch of white people." Now, with or without context, it's pretty clear that this decision is strictly to present House of the Dragon as more diverse. However, when we dive a bit further into the interview, there's at least an attempt to elaborate a bit. According to Condal, Martin toyed early on with the idea of depicting the Velaryons as black conquerors who came to Westeros from the west. The image stuck with the new showrunner. The change would further help heighten the questions of legitimacy that arise in House of the Dragon, amid the squabble for succession. Once we had that idea, it just felt like everything fell into place, Condal recalls. Now, George R. R. Martin has made it clear that this will be his story, but you could also interpret that as everything has his nod of approval, even if it's not 100% his original vision. To be fair with critics, it's easy to see this as Hollywood hijacking Martin's original story and littering it with agenda-driven messaging. As this reads, it does sound like the showrunners are retconning a bit here, disproving a handful of theories about how Corlys became black throughout travels across the world. Rather, it sounds like they are going to create Velaryons as historically black, which would put the emphasis for the Targaryens' alliance with the Velaryons strictly on their shared Velaryon heritage, more so than their shared physical appearance. Now, for some book readers, they may feel like that is just too much of an alteration of the source material that we've been reading about for 26 years. And for other readers, this may feel right on brand for the type of author George R. R. Martin has always been. My only personal statement that I really want to make here in regards to Ryan Condal and George R. R. Martin is one I've made before, and that's when critics use the term woke, suggesting George R. R. Martin has sold out to woke culture. If you believe that's true, then it seems you haven't been paying close enough attention to the themes George has implemented throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. Art always reflects life, or at least how life is perceived, and A Song of Ice and Fire is no exception, as it's always been riddled with a larger commentary on the traditional patriarchy. George has been delicate in the way he presents this information, but George has in the past labeled himself a feminist to later suggesting he's just an ally. His writing often reflects his view on war, among other areas that, especially in the 70s, would have been cornered him into a far-left ideology. But he's far more nuanced than that, and the absolutism culture is not something he participates in. There's nothing that indicates George has changed or went woke, because the way the term woke is used in a derogatory manner would describe much of George's worldviews historically. And this change to the Velaryons sounds like it was in part inspired by George, according to Ryan Condal. And if you don't believe there's any validation in what Ryan Condal says, again, take a look at George R. R. Martin, who he has been historically, and this change would definitely align with a lot of his worldviews. Now, with that said about the creator of the source material, that brings us back to the showrunners. While this may have been inspired by a prior shelved concept from George R. R. Martin, the implementation of this concept is going to be attached to Ryan Condal and to a lesser extent Miguel Sapochnik. Knowing this would definitely ignite the SJW versus anti-woke conversation around the show, they have to believe they created a viable and compelling story that isn't just diverse, but is enhanced by that diversity. Now, critics may not believe that to be the case. This could be just another example of woke messaging that's put above a good story. We can't at this time definitively say that is or is not the case, but it certainly is possible. The pushback that I'll give that, though, is those critics seem incapable of believing diversity can be done well while adhering to an overlying narrative. If we all step out of our echo chambers, myself included, remove ourselves from that confirmation bias and just allow this show to be released and objectively evaluate its quality, we just might find that there's a variety of other aspects to this show that we're really going to enjoy. There's things we may not like, but be honest with yourself. I'll be honest with myself. Let's look at our YouTube watch history. Is it just a ton of guys claiming to be centrists or moderates, etc., but they just yell throughout or say nothing positive throughout the duration of the video? That criticism, that negativity has given them a following. If they stray away from that kind of content, viewers and the algorithm will be altered, so they can't do that too much. So when you see a breakdown of this interview on a YouTube video, that creator's goal is to trigger you. If you're seeking negativity, they're going to try their best to deliver on that. Or let's just say you just have concerns about the changes in the show, and they need to tell you that Hollywood wants you to be isolated if you're a straight white man, and actually, you are the one who's oppressed by your limited choices for entertainment. There's a lot of entertainment options available, regardless of where your political views align. So that's not really the Brooklyn Bridge I'd want to sell you, but it does work for these type of creators, because negativity and complaining have become a commodity, so they can't be objectively unbiased. It's bad for their business. I'm not making that claim for this channel either. I definitely have a bias. We're all biased. I will be saddened if House of the Dragon is of poor quality. I want it to be good. It's an odd stance to take to want things to be bad and disappointing. Yet I literally get comments in my House of the Dragon videos hoping for just that. It's incredibly toxic, but if I remove them or block them, now they can chop that up to cancel culture. It's a vicious circle. It's very mentally and emotionally unhealthy relationships that we share here on the internet. But if this show is done poorly due to the way it chooses to implement diversity, it won't just be a smack in the face to the fans, it'll also be an insult to diversity itself. I have my reservations. We should have reservations. They are making a significant change, but execution is everything, and I've laid it out in prior videos how many advantages I believe House of the Dragon does have, so you will not hear me making excuses if this goes south. Ultimately, there's nothing wrong with inclusion if it's done carefully and serves to enhance the story. Keep in mind, this won't be the first time a character has been changed from the source material, and while we're being honest, you know that a lot of critics of House of the Dragon's casting didn't read the books, so nothing really changes for them anyway. Changes have been made before in real historically based stories, and a lot of times they switched a person of color out for a white man. The only difference I see is that this change might be provided with a reasonable explanation in the story itself.